Today, I'm joined by Robert Lugowski, CEO of CliniNote and passionate advocate, digital health and HealthTech innovation and clinical research. Robert, you've built a career across IT, venture capital, angel investing, and now lead a HealthTech company working at the intersection of AI, clinical research, and real-world data. How do you personally connect these chapters in your career, and why did all of that experience ultimately lead you to what you are building today?
Thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, my professional journey is a bit unusual, but at the end of the day, you will understand that it's coherent. So I started working for large IT corporations, Xerox, Hewlett-Packard, and Atos, country, regional positions, and this helped me to understand how the complex system actually work at scale. And it's not only about the technology, there's much more things that you have to take into consideration if you want to build something meaningful on scale. In 2014-15, I decided to change my career path and build something on my own. I moved into venture capital at the very early time when in Poland was just a few venture capital funds, not so many startups. And one of the first success I has built was Cobin Angels, the largest and most active angel club in Poland. Later, I also built a number of venture capital funds with particular focus on healthcare. The move into building a startup called CliniNote was a kind of natural step for me because with strong belief that innovation technology and especially AI in 2020, it was a bit innovative, could improve healthcare at a global scale, was fundamental. And also from the private perspective, my wife is a medical doctor, oncologist, very much involved in clinical research. So we had many discussions, many conversations, how healthcare could be improved. But probably the project that gave me the most satisfaction and was important for this decision was the national e-prescription project that I was leading still my corporate times. And this project was implemented just before COVID. And seeing how that infrastructure help protect health and maybe also many lives during the COVID pandemic, it was a very powerful confirmation for me how this work and how technology can help. So looking back, working for these big corporations taught me how to behave under the real world circumstances in big projects. Venture capital taught me how to think a bit outside the box, but also about the incentives, power dynamics. If you're small, you have to be very agile. And of course about the technology and venture and the healthcare and clinical research, it's probably one of the most complex things to do. So bringing all this experience together, I believe, can help us to solve these problems that we target in CliniNote. And from the learning perspective, I think that all this experience helped me to understand how incentives, the real people incentives, are important instead of theoretical process design. Then it's all about how people work and operate in the real circumstances, and of course the patients. Healthcare is slow. Change management is probably one of the most important things if you want to change it.
Definitely, this amazing career pathway. And I have quite a few friends who followed the opposite career path between startups and venture capital. Many of them started as a domain expert, then went to build their own startup, then went through all the circles of hell, let's say, of fundraising, shaping business models, stress testing assumptions, pitching endlessly, participating in accelerators, sending hundreds of cold emails, so on. And only after building successful companies, they did transition into venture capital. They entered VC with a very deep-lived understanding on what it actually means to build. In your case, the path is opposite, but no less fascinating. What strikes me as a key element in your story is the presence of strong real-world expertise around you, particularly through your wife, as you mentioned. She seems to illuminate the real pain points, right, and day-to-day realities of modern medicine, what physicians actually face on the ground. From what I understand, this perspective played a significant role in inspiring you to build your own company and your own startup. That, to me, is very compelling story, because when it comes to building any meaningful startup, genuine domain expertise, especially when it's close, trusted, and deeply lived, is often the most critical foundation. Based on your experience working with healthcare innovation across Europe, why does adoption remains one of the hardest challenges in clinical research and healthcare, even when technologies are mature and evidence-based?
Well, yes, adoption is actually the biggest challenge, and not only for startups, also for very powerful healthcare leaders. And in my opinion, it comes from the combination of several factors. First of all, healthcare operates under the principle primum nocere, as doctors, so it's not to harm. So patient safety, data protection, and trust are fundamental. This also leads us to the regulatory level, and of course this is very close to politics, and poorly considered decisions can have really long-term consequences. That's one. But second, it's about Europe, that it's extremely diverse. So healthcare systems differ not only between countries, languages, but also there's many terms of maturity, funding models, operational culture. And third important factor is very often underestimated, that innovation is evaluated in medicine in a specific way. So we need to provide some evidence that this new method is safe and it brings some benefits. And it simply takes a lot of time. Like, for example, in clinical trials with a new drug development, but it's very difficult to be adopted in technology, in innovation, especially if we consider the speed of innovation in the AI era. Yeah. So even if we have mature and evidence-based medicine, they often fail if they collide with all this complexity, also clinical workflows, reinvestment schemes, liability, but also professional identity, curse of the trust. So what we see is that people very often think that this is resilience to the innovation. I think it's not. It's more like a risk management on the key actors in healthcare ecosystem, doctors, regulators, because if they want to avoid the harm, it's not their main concern to optimize efficiency in the first or implement the innovation. But we think that the fundamental thing to faster the adoption of innovation is to co-design and implement these innovations together with the key stakeholders. If we can bring all these relevant people to the table, we have much higher chances to understand, but also to implement this innovation, technology, whatever we bring to the table on a scale.
It's all about trust, all about people, because I always say that we work with people and for people. And it's always easier to do everything together and involve expertise. And also you've pointed out that transformative multi-stakeholder initiatives are often the most effective way to accelerate adoption. Why this approach is particularly critical in healthcare and clinical research compared to more traditional single-player innovation models? Which stakeholders are absolutely essential in adoption?
Yes, so to add on what was said about bringing everybody together, I truly believe that this is the best to do it in an efficient way. Also from the speed perspective, the second important thing here is that in healthcare, usually the problems are never owned by a single factor. So solutions can be either. If we talk about multi-stakeholder initiatives, it's important to understand their incentives and complexities, constraints, and if we discuss together, we learn from each other. But also, if we develop some solution, it's owned, accepted, and credited by everybody. So if we talk about groups of stakeholders, of course, in my opinion, doctors, clinicians, healthcare providers, and patients are the most important part because it's all done for them. Then, of course, regulators, ethic bodies, because that trust is important, and if the regulations will not allow, you do nothing. Then those who has the power and budget, so usually it's industry partners, pharma, CRO, if we talk about clinical trials, and of course, technology providers. So I believe that in healthcare, it's very much about legitimacy, and if we build it together in such a group, we have much higher chances to be really successful with the adoption.
Definitely agree. And Robert, you mentioned a pan-European initiative using AI to transform clinical research. Could you walk us through this case from the original idea to execution? And what are the hardest condition challenges, across countries, institutions, and interest? What ultimately made the initiative move forward?
There is very interesting mechanism in Europe called Innovative Health Initiative. It's the public-private partnership initiated by the European Commission. And actually, with all this observation about clinical trials, why so many of them fail, why there is so big delay, so many difficulties, hurdles in implementing, we decided to form a project called AI. It's Accelerate Clinical Research in Europe with Artificial Intelligence, and use this Innovative Health Initiative to not only finance this project, but also to bring all the stakeholders together. So in principle, we believe that a lot of these challenges in clinical trials comes from the fact that the everyday clinical care has drifted in one direction, and clinical research, also drug development, is going the other direction, and complexity of those both areas is higher and higher, and the gap is not helping with that. And we think that one of the good example is the data. Data is fundamental for clinical research because we provide the evidence, and this is mostly based on observation and presented by data. So with all this misalignment about different processes, different formats, different governments around data, also with these differences in terms of maturity and hospital IT infrastructure, we believe that AI could be the response. So what we want to achieve with AI is to create a lightweight layer that sits on top existing clinical systems. And thanks to AI, we can work in a way that this layer integrates in a very easy way into current clinical workflows. So not changing the processes, doctor habits, and the need of heavy technical integrations. We can enable the collection of high quality data for research purposes. And if we do that on the European scale, we believe that we can solve the problem in clinical trials, maybe also some other problems. But to make it more concrete, maybe I can give some example. So let's take the patient qualification to the clinical trial. If we create the AI that in real time will work alongside the doctor, analyze patient data and clinical observation by the physician in real time, and if this data could be used to identify potential clinical trials. So we are talking here about matching patient data with inclusion and exclusion criteria in clinical trials, and giving this information back to the doctor still during the patient visit. This creates the opportunity for the doctor to propose this participation in clinical trial as additional therapeutic option on top of the standard treatment, and can be very beneficial not only for the patient, which thanks to that can have much better access to the innovative medicine, but also is good for doctors, for clinicians. It's increasing the speed of research, but it's also good for the healthcare system because they don't have to provide resources, and it's good for the industry, for pharma, because it can increase the efficiency and the speed of making clinical trials. So I think this is interesting example how these transformative projects can work, but also why we need all these stakeholders, because there is something that everybody can contribute and that everybody can get, and it's exactly why we need all of them sitting under one table. So this initiative is already the development stage. We plan to submit this in April to the Innovative Health Initiative. The consortium is quite large, but we still stay open because we believe that it has to be very inclusive, and we are still discussing with many partners who are interested to join. And please keep your fingers crossed for Acre AI.
Definitely, and I do believe, Robert, that even this conversation will help your potential stakeholders to understand why it's so important, And you mentioned that adoption is not really complex, right? So it is working with existing electronic medical records that we have across Europe, and it's different from country to country. While we are moving to unification with all the regulatory changes that we can see across our landscape, but I do believe it's the right tool that can be used for the current EMR that we have in different hospitals and different clinics participating in clinical trials or treating patients.
If we talk about this regulation incentives and how they face reality, I think that it is very often misunderstood. Regulation is not done for itself. If we look at this from the perspective that if something is regulated, it will be much easier adopted by the society. If not, maybe some people adopt, but probably difficult to go on scale. So understanding regulations should help startups, and on the other hand, in very many cases there is very different understanding of the regulations. Sometimes it's treated as defending some changes, some positions. In some cases people are more open, but as said before, I think that having this discussion with all the stakeholders, including regulations, can be key to understand, but also implement and maybe also change the regulations. So for founders, it may be not, let's say, very usual, but I think it's important to engage early in a discussion about the regulation, because if you want to foster the innovation, we have to be in this kind of dialogue.
And from your experience, Robert, are regulatory authorities really open right now to discussion? For what I can see, they are really flexible, even across Europe. At least they are open to discussions, and they are trying to collect as much information as it's possible in order, to build this system. And in such cases, people who are really interested in building this system are important, to be engaged to this process. So it's really great initiative from your side to be able to sit together with regulators, with founders, with all the stakeholders, and to build the proper system, because anyway, it's the only possible way to accelerate clinical trials in Europe, from my perspective, at least what I can see.
Well, participate in these discussions, and I think that openness is there for the discussion, not always adopting as fast as we could expect the conclusions, but I think they're also under huge pressure, not only from technology point of view, but of course AI is a very big topic and difficult in the same time. But also, if you talk about clinical trials, we see the decline of clinical trials in Europe, while globally, the number of clinical trials is growing. So there are some initiatives created to address this, and by definition, this has to be open for the stakeholder discussions. One of these initiatives is called ACT-EU, Accelerate Clinical Trial in the EU, and this is specifically created to increase European competitiveness globally in terms of clinical trials.
Thank you so much for sharing this information. It's really important to know for people, for everyone involved in the clinical trials, to see what kind of tools we have in order to build it.
So my personal experience with the regulators is that I had 2 meetings with Emmer Cook, the president of European Medicine Agency. Both of them took longer than expected, and I was really surprised by her openness and understanding how the innovation, sometimes quite brave ones, can influence healthcare. So I disagree that it's difficult to talk to regulators.
Thank you so much for sharing this information, Robert. When you think about how your perspective on systems, long-term change and adoption was formed, is there anything, a book, idea, experience, or influence that stands out and that you'd recommend to leaders operating in the intersection of clinical research, technology, and investment?
Yes, and probably as already visible from this discussion, I'm much more a practitioner than the theorists. I learn from observations, dialogue with people, than from books and academic partners. So one of the reasons why I became deeply involved in building CliniNote was a conversation a few years ago in 2020. The president of Novartis Oncology. This discussion helped me to understand where drug development is heading and how data and algorithm will become the future of medicine. Similar, very important discussion with the chairman of Roche Supervisory Board was about this ACR AI. I was not sure if such a small startup as CliniNote should engage and put resources on that, but having this discussion was confirming that we can not only go with some technology ideas, but with such a brave idea, it's much easier to discuss on very, very top level, and this mission can unite people around such initiatives. So following this topic, if I were to advise something for colleagues, founders, or somebody who is starting as an innovator in healthcare, I think it's very useful to have this discussion, to participate in accelerators or other formats when you can have really deep, structured kind of dialogue with the stakeholders that are important for you, for your innovation. For CliniNote, such a pivotal experience was participating in Day One Health Accelerator in Basel, and that exposure and many discussions with top leaders in healthcare directly led us to the strategic pivot. And this is actually the reason why we are right now in clinical trials.
That's amazing experience and advice for people from our industry. And I do believe accelerators also increase the trust to company, to startup, because if accelerators put an effort to share experience with this particular startup, it will be definitely interesting for other companies. So thank you so much, Robert, for your experience and for your time today. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to keep in touch with you. And I wish you the best and great success with your company.
Thank you very much.